The morning alarm buzzed at exactly 6:30 a.m., just like it had for the past 8 years. Kenji rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the small calendar on his nightstand. Another day at Yamaha Electronics awaited him. At 32 years old, he had been working as an engineer in the company's research department, watching the same gray walls and listening to the same office conversations day after day. His wife Yuki was already in the kitchen, preparing his lunchbox with the care she always showed. Their small apartment in suburban Tokyo wasn't much, but it was home. Their 3-year-old daughter was still sleeping peacefully in her bed, unaware that her father was about to face one of the most challenging days of his career. "You seem worried. Today?" Yuki said softly, wrapping the rice balls in fresh paper. "Is everything okay at work?" Kenji forced a smile. "Just thinking about the presentation today. I hope it goes well." But deep inside, he knew it wouldn't be easy. For months, he had been working on something that could change everything. While other engineers focused on making existing products slightly better, Kenji had been dreaming bigger. Much bigger. The train to downtown Tokyo was packed as usual. Kenji clutched his briefcase tightly, knowing it contained blueprints and designs that had kept him awake for countless nights. Inside were detailed plans for a revolutionary music device, something that could store hundreds of songs without using any tapes or CDs. It seemed impossible to most people, but Kenji could see the future clearly. Walking into the Yamaha Electronics building, he greeted the security guard with his usual polite bow. The elevator ride to the 7th floor felt longer than normal. His heart was beating faster with each passing floor. Today wasn't just another day at work. Today, he would present his vision to the management team. The research department was buzzing with morning activity. His colleague Hiroshi waved from across the room. "Ready for the big presentation?" he asked with genuine interest. "As ready as I'll ever be," Kenji replied, settling into his desk. He opened his briefcase one more time, checking that all his documents were in perfect order. The prototype he had built in his garage looked crude compared to the polished products Yamaha usually made, but it worked. And more importantly, it proved that his idea wasn't just a fantasy. At 10 a.m. sharp, Kenji walked into the conference room. The long wooden table was surrounded by senior managers, including his direct supervisor, Mr. Tanaka. Tanaka was a man in his 50s who had climbed the corporate ladder through careful politics rather than innovation. He had always been skeptical of new ideas, especially ones that came from younger employees. "Good morning, everyone," Kenji began, his voice slightly shaking. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my research with you." He connected his laptop to the projector and began his presentation. On the screen appeared images of his digital music device, a small, rectangular gadget that looked nothing like the bulky cassette players everyone was used to. "For the past year, I have been developing a completely new way for people to listen to music," Kenji explained. "This device can store up to 300 songs in digital format. Users won't need to carry multiple cassette tapes or worry about them getting damaged. Everything will be stored electronically." The room was quiet. Some managers leaned forward with curiosity, while others looked confused. Mr. Tanaka's expression was particularly hard to read. Kenji continued with growing confidence. "Market research shows that consumers are frustrated with current music formats. Tapes break easily and CDs skip when moved. This technology solves all those problems while offering unprecedented convenience." He pulled out his prototype, a device about the size of a small book, but much thinner. "This is a working model. It may not look perfect, but it demonstrates the core technology." He pressed a button and clear music began playing through the connected speakers. For a moment, the room was filled with amazement. Several managers exchanged impressed glances. The sound quality was crisp, and the device was incredibly compact, compared to anything they had seen before. But then Mr. Tanaka stood up, his face showing clear disapproval. "Nakamura-san," he said formally, using Kenji's last name in the distant way Japanese bosses often addressed subordinates they wanted to put in their place. "While your enthusiasm is noted, I must question the practical value of this project." The room's atmosphere suddenly changed. Other managers who had seemed interested moments before now looked uncertain, waiting to follow Tanaka's lead. Consumers have been perfectly happy with cassette players for decades, Tanaka continued, his voice getting louder. Why would they want to abandon a proven technology for something so complicated? Do you really think ordinary people want to learn how to use computers just to listen to music? Kenji felt his face getting hot, but he tried to remain respectful. Sir, I believe consumers are ready for more advanced technology. In America and Europe, personal computers are becoming common in homes. Digital technology is the future. The future? Tanaka laughed coldly. Nakamura-san, you're an engineer, not a fortune teller. Our job is to improve existing products, not to chase impossible dreams. Consumers want reliability, not complexity. Other managers began nodding in agreement. With Tanaka, the mood in the room shifted completely against Kenji. His carefully prepared presentation suddenly seemed naive and unrealistic under their collective skepticism. Furthermore, Tanaka continued, clearly enjoying his position of authority, the cost of producing such devices would be enormous. Who would pay premium prices for something that does the same job as a $20 cassette player? You're suggesting we bet our company's reputation on an idea that makes no economic sense. Kenji looked around the room, hoping to find at least one supportive face. But everyone avoided eye contact. In Japanese corporate culture, opposing a senior manager publicly was almost unthinkable. Sir, if I may, Kenji said quietly. Other electronics companies around the world are already investing in similar technologies. If we don't start now, we might be left behind. This comment seemed to anger Tanaka even more. Are you suggesting that I don't understand our industry? I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, young man. I know what works and what doesn't. And this? He pointed dismissively at Kenji's prototype. This will never work in the real world. The humiliation was complete. Kenji could feel his colleagues' sympathetic but helpless stares. In the rigid hierarchy of Japanese corporations, challenging a superior's judgment was career suicide. He had not only been rejected but publicly embarrassed in front of the entire management team. I think we've heard enough, Tanaka concluded. Nakamura-san, I suggest you focus your talents on projects that can actually benefit our company. We have real deadlines and real products that need improvement. Please don't waste any more time on these fantasy gadgets. The meeting ended abruptly. As managers filed out of the room, a few offered Kenji sympathetic looks, but no one dared to speak up in his support. The prototype that had taken him months to build now seemed like an expensive toy that no one wanted. Walking back to his desk, Kenji felt a mixture of shame and anger burning in his chest. 8 years of loyal service, countless successful projects, and this was how his biggest idea was received. Not with thoughtful consideration or constructive feedback, but with public humiliation and dismissal. That evening, as he sat in the train heading home, Kenji stared at his reflection in the window. The face looking back at him seemed older somehow, marked by the day's disappointment. But behind the sadness, something else was growing, a determination he had never felt before. A quiet voice in his mind kept repeating Tanaka's words. This will never work in the real world. Maybe it was time to find out what the real world actually wanted. The weeks following the presentation felt like living in slow motion. Every morning, Kenji would sit at his desk working on routine projects while his revolutionary idea gathered dust in his desk drawer. The other engineers treated him differently now. Not unkindly, but with the careful distance people keep when they know someone has fallen from grace. Hiroshi, his closest colleague, would sometimes glance over with worried eyes. During lunch breaks, he would try to lighten the mood with jokes about office politics, but both men knew the situation was serious. In Japanese corporate culture, challenging authority and being publicly rejected left lasting scars on one's reputation. Maybe it's for the best, Hiroshi said one afternoon, as they ate their lunchboxes on the company rooftop. Tanaka-san has been here for 20 years. He must know what he's talking about. Kenji just nodded, but inside his mind was racing. Every evening he would return home and scan international technology magazines that Yuki bought for him from the local bookstore. The articles painted a picture that made his heart sink and his determination grow stronger at the same time. Companies in America were indeed developing digital music technology. A small startup in California had just received millions in funding for something remarkably similar to his own idea. European electronics manufacturers were investing heavily in what they called the digital revolution. The future Kenji had envisioned was happening, just not in Japan. "Look at this," he said to Yuki one evening, pointing to an article about American tech companies. "They're doing exactly what I proposed to Yamaha, but they're already 2 years ahead of where we could have been." Yuki set down her tea and studied the magazine carefully. She had always been more practical than her husband, but she had also seen the passion in his eyes when he worked on his invention. "What does this mean for us?" she asked. "It means Tanaka was wrong. Completely wrong. And while he sits in his office protecting old technology, the world is moving forward without us." The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. Kenji was reviewing routine circuit designs when Hiroshi rushed to his desk, holding a fresh copy of Electronics Weekly magazine. "You need to see this," Hiroshi whispered, trying not to attract attention from other workers. The cover story featured a major announcement from Sony America. They had just unveiled their latest research project, a portable digital music device that could store up to 200 songs. The prototype looked remarkably similar to Kenji's design, though clearly more advanced. Kenji's hands shook as he read the article. Sony executives were quoted saying this technology would revolutionize how people experience music and predicting it would make cassette players obsolete within 5 years. The same predictions Kenji had made in his presentation, the same vision that Tanaka had called fantasy. But the most painful part was the final paragraph. The article mentioned that Sony was actively looking for additional patent holders and innovative engineers to join their digital music division. They were offering substantial signing bonuses and equity positions for the right talent. "If I had applied for patents 6 months ago," Kenji thought, "I could be working with Sony right now instead of sitting here designing the same old circuits." That afternoon, Kenji made a decision that would change everything. He walked to Tanaka's office and knocked on the door. "Come in," Tanaka's voice called from inside. The office was exactly as Kenji remembered from his early days at the company. Awards for outstanding traditional excellence lined the walls. A photo of Tanaka shaking hands with company executives from 1985 sat prominently on his desk. Everything in the room spoke of past achievements and established ways of doing things. "Nakamura-san," Tanaka said without looking up from his paperwork. "What can I do for you?" Kenji placed the Sony magazine article on Tanaka's desk. "Sir, I wanted to show you this. Sony has just announced a digital music player very similar to the one I presented 3 months ago." Tanaka glanced at the magazine with obvious irritation. "And what exactly am I supposed to do with this information?" "Sir, with respect, this proves that my idea wasn't a fantasy. Major companies are investing billions in this technology. We could still enter this market if we acted quickly." For the first time in months, Tanaka looked directly at Kenji. His expression was not pleased. "Nakamura-san, let me make something very clear. Just because one company decides to waste money on unproven technology doesn't validate your proposal. Sony America makes many products that fail in the marketplace. Are you suggesting I should risk our company's stability based on their experiments?" Kenji took a deep breath. He had prepared for this response, but hearing it still felt like a slap. "Sir, it's not just Sony. Companies across America and Europe are moving toward digital music. The technology exists, the market demand is growing. We have the engineering expertise to compete, but only if we start now." Tanaka stood up from his chair, his face reddening with anger. "Enough. I've heard quite enough of your opinions about what our company should or shouldn't do. You're an engineer, not a business strategist. Your job is to follow instructions, not to question company direction. But sir, no buts. Nakamura-san, your obsession with this digital music nonsense has become disruptive." You've wasted company time, company resources, and now you're here trying to second-guess decisions made by people far more experienced than you. The words hit Kenji like physical blows. 3 months of frustration, watching international competitors advance while Yamaha stood still, suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. "Sir," Kenji said quietly, "what if you're wrong?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. In Japanese corporate hierarchy, such directness was almost unthinkable. Tanaka's face turned pale, then red with rage. "What did you just say to me?" I asked respectfully. "What if you're wrong about digital music technology? What if in 5 years every major electronics company is making these devices except us? What if we miss the biggest opportunity in our industry's history because we were afraid to try something new?" Tanaka slammed his hand on the desk, causing pens to jump and papers to scatter. "How dare you speak to me like this? I've been in this industry since before you graduated from university. I've seen dozens of young engineers like you come and go, all thinking they know better than their superiors. And where are they now, gone, forgotten? Because they couldn't accept that experience matters more than wild dreams. Sir, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm trying to help our company succeed." Help our company? By questioning my judgment? By insisting that I was wrong in front of the entire management team? By continuing to waste time on projects I've specifically told you to abandon? Kenji realized that no amount of evidence or reasoning would change Tanaka's mind. The man's ego was too invested in being right. Admitting that a junior engineer might have a valid point would undermine everything Tanaka believed about hierarchy and authority. "I understand your position, sir," Kenji said calmly. "But I believe in this technology. I believe it will change everything." "Then you believe in something that will never happen. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you should. Consider whether this company is the right place for your talents." The threat was clear. Stop pursuing digital music technology or find another job. For most employees, this would have ended the conversation. Corporate security was precious in Japan. Leaving a stable position at an established company was almost unthinkable. But Kenji thought about the Sony article. He thought about American and European companies racing ahead while Yamaha remained frozen in the past. He thought about his prototype sitting unused in his desk drawer while competitors developed the same ideas. Most importantly, he thought about his daughter. What kind of future was he building for her by accepting defeat and giving up on innovation? "Thank you for your time, sir," Kenji said, bowing politely. "I'll consider what you've said very carefully." That evening, Kenji came home to find Yuki preparing dinner in their small kitchen. Their daughter was playing with toy blocks on the living room floor, building towers and knocking them down with delighted laughter. "How was work today?" Yuki asked, the same question she had asked thousands of times before. But today, Kenji's answer would be different. "I think it's time for a change," he said quietly. "A big change." Yuki stopped stirring the soup and turned to look at her husband. Something in his voice told her this wasn't about getting a promotion or changing departments. "What kind of change?" Kenji sat down at their small dining table and looked at his hands. These hands had built the prototype that could have changed Yamaha's future. Now they would have to build something even bigger. "I'm going to prove Tanaka wrong, not by arguing with him, but by showing the world he was wrong. I'm going to build this technology myself." The words hung in the air between them. Yuki slowly sat down across from her husband, understanding immediately what he was suggesting. "You mean leave Yamaha?" "I mean start over. Use our savings to build something real. Take the biggest risk of our lives to chase the biggest opportunity we'll ever see." Outside their small apartment, rain continued to fall on Tokyo. But inside, a decision was being made that would change everything. The resignation letter sat on Kenji's desk for 3 days before he found the courage to submit it. Each morning he would stare at the simple white envelope, knowing that opening it would change his family's life forever. On Thursday morning, he finally walked into the Human Resources office and handed it over with shaking hands. "Are you sure about this, Nakamura-san?" asked Mrs. Sato, the HR manager who had processed his hiring paperwork 8 years earlier. "Yamaha is a good company, Stable jobs like this don't come easily. I'm sure, Kenji replied, though his voice betrayed his nervousness. Thank you for everything. Word spread quickly through the office. Some colleagues seemed shocked that anyone would voluntarily leave such security. Others whispered that maybe Kenji had been forced out after his confrontation with Tanaka. Hiroshi was the only one who openly supported the decision. You're braver than I am, he said during their final lunch together. I've been complaining about this place for years, but I don't have the courage to actually leave. It's not about courage, Kenji admitted. It's about not being able to live with myself if I don't try. The hardest part was cleaning out his desk. 8 years of work life fit into one small cardboard box. Photos of his family, a few technical manuals, his favorite coffee mug, and buried at the bottom, the prototype that had started everything. As he held the small device, several co-workers gathered around his desk to say goodbye. What will you do now? Asked Yamamoto-san, an older engineer who had mentored Kenji in his early years. I'm going to build something new, Kenji said simply. That weekend, Kenji and Yuki sat at their kitchen table with all their financial documents spread out before them. The numbers were both encouraging and terrifying. We have 2.8 million yen in savings, Yuki said, running her finger down their bank statements. That's enough to live on for maybe 8 months if we're very careful. I won't need that much time, Kenji said with more confidence than he felt. 6 months to perfect the design, find an investor and get started. That should be enough. Yuki looked at her husband with the mixture of love and concern that only wives of dreamers truly understand. And if it takes longer, then we'll figure it out. But Yuki, I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. This technology is the future, I know it is. The next Monday, instead of taking the train to Yamaha, Kenji took a different train to Akihabara, Tokyo's electronics district. He had found a tiny workspace above a computer parts store, barely large enough for a desk and some equipment. The rent was 200,000 yen per month, nearly a quarter of their savings, but it was the cheapest space he could find. The workshop was nothing like his comfortable office at Yamaha. The walls were thin, the air conditioning barely worked, and the smell of soldering flux from the shop below filled the air constantly. But it was his. For the first time in 8 years, he could work on exactly what he wanted, exactly how he wanted. His daily routine became almost monastic in its simplicity. Up at 5 a.m., quick breakfast with his family, then to the workshop by 6:30. He would work until 10 p.m., surviving on convenience store meals and vending machine coffee. Yuki had taken extra shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse, often working double shifts to help support the family. Daddy's building something special, she would tell their daughter when asked why Papa wasn't home for dinner anymore. Something that will help people listen to music. The technical challenges were enormous. Working alone, Kenji had to master skills that usually required entire teams. Circuit design, software programming, battery optimization, manufacturing. Processes. Every aspect of the device demanded expertise he was still developing. His first major breakthrough came in month 2. He had been struggling with battery life, watching his prototype drain power in less than 30 minutes of use. Then during one of his late-night sessions, he discovered a more efficient way to compress the digital music files. Not only did this save battery power, but it also allowed him to store 400 songs instead of 300. It works, he shouted to the empty workshop, forgetting that it was past midnight. The computer parts store owner below banged on his ceiling in complaint. But technical success didn't translate to business success. Kenji spent the 3rd month trying to find investors, carrying his prototype to meetings across Tokyo. The response was always politely negative. Very interesting technology, said Mr. Ishida, a venture capitalist who specialized in electronics. But the market isn't ready for this level of complexity. Japanese consumers prefer simple, reliable devices. The manufacturing costs would be too high, explained another potential investor. You'd need to sell these for at least 80,000 yen each. Who would pay that much for a music player? Meeting after meeting ended the same way. Polite interest followed, By practical concerns followed by gentle rejection, Kenji began to understand why so few people left stable corporate jobs to start their own companies. The loneliness of entrepreneurship was crushing. By month 4, their savings had dropped below 1 million yen. Yuki had stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. They ate rice and vegetables for most meals, with meat only on special occasions. Their daughter didn't complain, but Kenji noticed she had outgrown her shoes, and they couldn't afford to replace them immediately. "Maybe we should think about other options," Yuki suggested gently one evening. "You could look for another engineering job. Your experience is valuable." "Just 2 more months," Kenji pleaded. "I'm so close to a breakthrough. The technology is nearly perfect." "Technology doesn't pay rent," Yuki replied, not unkindly, but with the practical wisdom of someone watching their bank account shrink daily. The lowest point came in month 5. Kenji's prototype malfunctioned during the most important presentation of his life, in front of executives from Panasonic. The screen went black in the middle of his demonstration, and no amount of button pressing could revive it. The executives exchanged embarrassed glances as Kenji desperately tried to restart the device. "Perhaps you could send us some information when your product is more stable," the lead executive said diplomatically. That night, Kenji sat in his tiny workshop staring at the broken prototype. 5 months of 16-hour days, their life savings nearly gone, and he had nothing to show for it but a device that couldn't even complete a simple demonstration. For the first time since leaving Yamaha, he seriously considered giving up. He called his old colleague Hiroshi, who had news from the former workplace. "Tanaka got promoted last month," Hiroshi said. "He's now senior director of product development. Word is that he's been telling everyone how smart he was to avoid that digital music nonsense that Nakamura was obsessed with." The irony was bitter. While Kenji struggled to find investors for technology he knew would change the world, the man who had rejected that technology was being rewarded for his narrow vision. But sometimes the darkest moments come just before dawn. The breakthrough that would change everything was only days away, though Kenji had no way of knowing it yet. His wife was now 7 months pregnant with their second child, working extra shifts despite her growing belly. Their savings had dwindled to just enough for 2 more months of basic expenses. The prototype still had bugs that made it unreliable during crucial moments. Yet every morning, Kenji still got up at 5 a.m. Every day, he still took the train to Akihabara. Every evening, he still worked until his eyes burned from staring at circuit boards and computer screens. "Why do you keep going?" Yuki asked him one night as he rubbed his tired eyes. Kenji looked at his pregnant wife, thought about their daughter sleeping in the next room, and remembered Tanaka's dismissive words from almost a year ago. "Because I know I'm right," he said, simply. "And someday, the world will know it too." He had no idea that someday was just around the corner, in the form of an unexpected visitor at a Tokyo electronics trade show who would recognize what everyone else had missed. The Tokyo Electronics Expo wasn't even on Kenji's original plan. With only 300,000 yen left in their bank account, spending money on a booth seemed impossible. But when his neighbor in the workshop mentioned that small startups could share exhibition space for just 50,000 yen, Kenji saw it as his last real chance. "It's a huge risk," Yuki said as they discussed it over their simple dinner of rice and miso soup. She was 8 months pregnant now, and her belly made it difficult to sit comfortably at their small table. "If nothing comes from this expo, we'll have to make some very hard decisions." Kenji knew what she meant. With the baby coming in just a few weeks, he would need to find regular employment soon. The dream of revolutionary technology would have to wait for another lifetime. "One more try," he promised. "If this doesn't work, I'll start looking for engineering jobs next week." The expo hall was overwhelming. Massive companies like Sony, Panasonic, and Sharp had elaborate booths with bright lights and attractive displays. Kenji's shared corner table looked pathetic by comparison. He had printed some simple flyers at a copy shop and brought his latest prototype, which he had managed to repair after the disastrous Panasonic presentation. For the first 2 days, barely anyone stopped at his table. Visitors would glance at his handwritten sign reading, "Digital Music Revolution," and keep walking toward the flashier corporate displays. By Thursday afternoon, Kenji had spoken with maybe 20 people, none of whom seemed genuinely interested in licensing his technology. He was packing up his materials early, feeling defeated once again, when a tall American man approached his table. The stranger was probably in his 40s, wearing a casual shirt instead of the formal business suits most expo visitors preferred. "Excuse me," the man said in accented but clear Japanese. "Is this your digital music player?" "Yes, it is," Kenji replied, switching to English. His university English was rusty, but he could manage basic conversation. "Would you like to see how it works?" The American's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Absolutely. I'm David Richardson from California. My company develops audio technology." Kenji demonstrated his device, playing several songs and showing how users could skip between tracks instantly. He explained the storage capacity, the battery life improvements he had achieved, and the compression algorithm he had developed. David listened intently, asking technical questions that showed he truly understood the engineering involved. This was different from the polite but superficial interest Kenji usually encountered. "How long have you been working on this?" David asked. "About 2 years total. The last 6 months full-time." "Full-time? You mean this is your only project?" Kenji hesitated, then decided honesty was his only option. "I left my corporate job to develop this technology. My former supervisor didn't think it had commercial potential." David laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement. "Your former supervisor must not be following American market trends. We've been tracking consumer interest in digital music storage for 3 years now. The demand is definitely there, but most companies are struggling with the technical challenges you seem to have solved." For the first time in months, Kenji felt a flutter of hope. "You think there's really a market for this?" "I don't think there's a market. I know there's a market. The question is whether you're interested in partnering with an American company to develop it." They talked for another hour. David explained that his company, Pacific Digital Systems, was small but well-funded. They specialized in developing audio technology that larger companies would eventually license and manufacture. They had been looking for exactly the kind of breakthrough Kenji had achieved. "I'd like to offer you a licensing deal," David said finally. "It won't make you rich immediately, but it would give you the resources to perfect your technology and file proper patents. Are you interested?" Kenji's hands were shaking as he tried to appear calm and professional. "What kind of terms are we talking about?" "How about this? We provide $200,000 upfront for exclusive licensing rights in North America, plus ongoing royalties on any products that use your technology. And if things go well, we'd want to hire you as our chief technology consultant." The numbers swam in Kenji's head. $200,000 was nearly 30 million yen. More money than he had ever imagined having at once. It was enough to support his family for years while he continued developing the technology. I need to discuss this with my wife," Kenji managed to say. "Of course. Here's my card. I'm staying in Tokyo for 3 more days. Why don't you think it over and call me tomorrow?" That evening, Kenji could barely contain his excitement as he rode the train home. After 6 months of rejection and financial stress, someone finally understood what he had been trying to build. Someone was willing to bet real money on his vision, but when he arrived home, he found Yuki sitting uncomfortably on their couch, one hand pressed to her back. "The baby's coming," she said quietly. "I've been having contractions for 2 hours." The next 18 hours were a blur of hospital corridors, nervous waiting, and finally incredible joy. Their son was born healthy and perfect, weighing 3.2 kilograms. As Kenji held his newborn child, the licensing deal seemed almost secondary to this miracle. "What should we name him?" Yuki asked weakly from her hospital bed. "Akira," Kenji said without hesitation. "Bright and clear, like the future we're building for him." David was understanding when Kenji called to explain the delay. "Congratulations, family comes first. Take care of your wife and new baby. The offer will still be here when you're ready." But fate wasn't finished with its surprises. While Kenji was at the hospital with his new family, Massive changes were happening at Yamaha Electronics. The quarterly sales report had just been released, and the numbers were shocking. Yamaha's portable music division had suffered its worst performance in 15 years. Sales of cassette players had dropped by 40% compared to the previous year. Meanwhile, competitors who had embraced digital technology were reporting record profits. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Someone needed to be held responsible for Yamaha's failure to anticipate market trends. The blame fell squarely on Tanaka, the man who had so confidently dismissed digital music as a passing fad. "How could we have missed this shift so completely?" demanded the company president. "Our competitors are calling digital music the wave of the future, while we're still producing the same products we made 10 years ago." Tanaka tried to defend his decisions, but the numbers spoke for themselves. While he had been protecting traditional technology, the market had moved decisively toward digital innovation. Within a week, Tanaka was quietly transferred to a minor administrative position. The promotion he had received just months earlier was rescinded. Whispers in the office suggested he would be encouraged to take early retirement soon. Meanwhile, Hiroshi called Kenji with updates from their former workplace. "You should see the panic here," Hiroshi reported. "Management is suddenly very interested in digital music technology. They're scrambling to hire consultants and trying to figure out how to catch up with the competition." "Too little, too late," Kenji replied, bouncing baby Akira gently in his arms. "By the time they develop anything, the market leaders will be years ahead." The irony was perfect. The same technology that Tanaka had dismissed as impractical fantasy was now being recognized as essential for survival in the modern electronics industry. The man who had publicly humiliated Kenji for suggesting this direction was now facing professional ruin for his short-sightedness. When Kenji finally met with David to finalize their licensing agreement, he felt a deep sense of vindication. Not the bitter satisfaction of seeing an enemy defeated, but the quiet confidence that comes from being proven absolutely right. "Your timing is perfect," David told him as they signed the contracts. 3 major American electronics companies have already expressed interest in licensing this technology for their next-generation music players. "You're going to be very busy over the next few years." As Kenji walked out of the lawyer's office, with the signed agreement in his briefcase, he thought about how much had changed in just 1 week. A new son, financial security, and validation that his vision had been correct all along. The most satisfying moment came when he received a formal letter from Yamaha Electronics' new management team. They were requesting a meeting to discuss potential collaboration on digital music technology. The letter was polite and professional, but Kenji could read the desperation between the lines. They finally understood what he had been trying to tell them 2 years earlier. But by now, Kenji was far ahead of where Yamaha could ever hope to catch up. The student had become the teacher, and the lesson was just beginning. 5 years had passed since that life-changing meeting with David at the Tokyo Electronics Expo. Kenji now sat in the corner office of a gleaming tower in downtown Tokyo, watching the city bustle below through floor-to-ceiling windows. The nameplate on his desk read, Kenji Nakamura, CEO, Nakamura Digital Systems. But he still sometimes felt like that nervous engineer who had once been humiliated in a corporate boardroom. The transformation had been remarkable. What started as a simple licensing deal with Pacific Digital Systems had grown into something neither Kenji nor David could have imagined. The technology that Tanaka had dismissed as fantasy was now powering music devices across 3 continents. "Sir, the Sony executives have arrived for the 2 p.m. meeting," his assistant announced through the intercom. Kenji smiled at the irony. Sony, the same company whose American division had inspired him to leave Yamaha, was now seeking to license his latest innovations. The roles had completely reversed from those early days when he was desperately seeking investors. The Sony team was led by a woman named Ms. Fujiwara, their new director of digital innovation. She was probably in her 30s with the same hungry look in her eyes that Kenji remembered having during his startup days. "Nakamura-san," she said with a respectful bow. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We've been following your company's development with great interest." "Please, have a seat," Kenji replied, gesturing to the comfortable chairs arranged around a low table. I understand you're interested in our new compression technology. Very much so. Our engineers have been struggling with battery life issues in our latest portable devices. Your solution could solve problems we've been working on for 2 years. As they discussed technical details, Kenji couldn't help but think about how different this conversation was from his early desperate pitches to investors. Now major corporations came to him. They waited for his availability. They offered him terms instead of the other way around. But the real validation had come 3 years earlier, when Nakamura Digital Systems went public on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Kenji still remembered that morning, standing on the trading floor, with Yuki and their 2 children, watching their company's stock price climb higher than anyone had predicted. "Papa, why are all these people clapping for you?" 5-year-old Akira had asked, tugging on his father's suit jacket. "They're not clapping for me, son. They're clapping for an idea that became real." The initial public offering valued Nakamura Digital Systems at 12 billion yen, making Kenji one of Japan's youngest billionaires. But more importantly, it proved that innovation could triumph over corporate conservatism. The technology that one man had called impossible was now worth more than many traditional electronics companies. After the Sony meeting concluded successfully, Kenji had an hour before his next appointment. He used the time to walk through his company's research and development floor, something he tried to do every day. Unlike the rigid hierarchy at Yamaha, Nakamura Digital Systems encouraged engineers to pursue bold ideas and question conventional thinking. "Nakamura-san," called out Keiko, one of his youngest engineers, "could you look at this prototype? I think we might be able to increase storage capacity by another 30%. Kenji examined her work with genuine interest. This was the kind of innovative thinking that Tanaka had tried to suppress at Yamaha. Here it was celebrated and rewarded. "Excellent work, Keiko-san. Have you filed for a patent yet?" "I wanted to make sure it actually worked first," she replied with a grin. "Smart thinking, but don't wait too long. In this industry, timing is everything." As he spoke those words, Kenji's phone buzzed with an urgent message from his secretary. Yamaha Electronics had called again, requesting another meeting. This was their 4th request in 6 months. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. Yamaha, the company that had rejected his vision and driven him away, was now desperate to acquire the technology they had once dismissed. Their market share in portable music devices had collapsed to less than 5%, while companies using Nakamura's innovations dominated the global market. But the most poetic justice had come 2 months earlier, when Kenji received an unexpected visitor at his office. His old colleague Hiroshi had called ahead asking if he could bring someone by for an informal chat. Kenji had agreed, thinking it might be another former Yamaha employee looking for a job. Instead, Hiroshi had arrived with Tanaka himself. The man who had once held absolute power over Kenji's career looked smaller somehow. His expensive suit couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders or the worry lines around his eyes. Yamaha had offered him early retirement after their digital music division failed spectacularly. But at 58, he was too young to stop working and too old to easily find another senior position. "Nakamura-san," Tanaka had said, his voice lacking its former authority. "I want to apologize for how I treated your ideas when you worked for us. I was wrong about digital music technology." The admission hung in the air like a confession. This was the same man who had publicly humiliated Kenji, who had called his life's work fantasy gadgets, who had suggested that consumers would never embrace such complexity. "I understand that Yamaha has approached your company several times about potential partnerships," Tanaka continued. "I wanted to speak with you personally, to ask if you might consider helping us transition into digital technology." Kenji had looked at his former supervisor with a mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. The satisfaction was undeniable. After years of being told he was wrong, here was absolute proof that he had been right all along. But the sympathy was real too. Tanaka was a man whose career had been destroyed by his inability to see the future. "Mr. Tanaka," Kenji had said carefully, "I appreciate you coming here. That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Tanaka admitted, "but Yamaha is struggling. We have 3,000 employees who might lose their jobs if we can't find a way to compete in the modern market. I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for them." That conversation had led to today's decision. After months of internal discussions and careful planning, Nakamura Digital Systems was ready to announce a major licensing deal with Yamaha Electronics. Not an acquisition, not a merger, but a partnership that would give Yamaha access to the technology they needed while preserving jobs and allowing both companies to succeed. "You don't have to do this," David had warned during their last video conference from California. "Yamaha treated you terribly. You don't owe them anything." "You're right," Kenji had replied. "I don't owe them anything. But I owe something to the future. If we can show that innovation and tradition can work together, maybe the next generation of engineers won't have to choose between security and creativity." The press conference announcing the partnership was scheduled for the following week. Industry analysts were calling it the biggest technology licensing deal in Japanese electronics history. Yamaha's stock price had already jumped 40% on rumors of the agreement. As Kenji prepared to leave his office that evening, he looked at the photo on his desk showing his family at last year's summer vacation. Yuki was smiling broadly, holding their 3-year-old daughter, while 8-year-old Akira posed seriously in his school uniform. They lived in a beautiful house now, with a garden where the children could play safely. Money would never again be a source of worry, but the photo that meant the most to him was smaller and less prominently displayed. It showed him in his tiny Akihabara workshop, holding his first working prototype. He was exhausted in the picture, his hair messy and his clothes wrinkled from another 18-hour day. Yet his eyes shone with the certainty that he was building something that would change the world. That certainty had been tested by rejection, financial hardship, and professional humiliation. But it had never been broken. And now, a decade later, the world had finally caught up to his vision. The elevator descended toward the parking garage where his driver waited. Through the glass walls, Kenji could see Tokyo's neon lights beginning to flicker on as darkness fell. Somewhere in this vast city, he imagined there might be another young engineer working late in a tiny workshop, convinced that everyone else was wrong about the future. He hoped that person would have the courage to keep going, even when the whole world seemed to be saying no. Because sometimes when you believe strongly enough in tomorrow, you can actually help create it. The boy who had been told his dreams were impossible had proven that impossible was just another word for not yet invented. And in a world that moved faster every day, not yet could become right now more quickly than anyone ever imagined.